Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Bree. Today's video is going to be my autumn book recommendations video. I love doing these recommendation videos, especially seasonally. I think they're so much fun and they just get me in the spirit of the season. So I wanted to give you a list of books from coziest to scariest, and I just wanted to also give a disclaimer that please look up any content warnings that you may need. I will really be going into those in this, and it's just always good because while I might think something's less scary, maybe it's more scary to you because it's dealing with something you're sensitive to. So just that little disclaimer out there. I do want to go through from coziest to scariest, and I think these have got a perfect autumnal vibe, and each one has a little bit of a different reasoning for it, but I hope you enjoy, and I hope you're going to be enjoying this fall season if you live in the part of the world that is currently going through fall. Anyway, let's get into the video. So the first one I have to recommend is a book that I think is well known on the internet, but I just had to include it because I do really feel that it is a perfect fall read. That is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This has taken the book community by storm for good reason. I really think it's worth the hype. This is following an orc, Viv, and she's had enough of battles and bloodshed, and she decides to open this coffee shop, and she hires Tangerine, who is a succubus, and also Thimble, who is a little mouse, and there's also a human character, Cal, who helps her build the shop, and it's just about them building this coffee shop together. And there is some underweaving plots to do with opening this coffee shop, and it really is, as it says, high fantasy and low stakes. This is a perfect for the fall vibes because of the coffee shop. Fall is really the season that I feel like going and curling up in a coffee shop with a warm cup of coffee and or tea. I drink a lot of tea, so that's what I would be choosing. But just curling up with a book in a coffee shop, this is like that in a book. So if you have not read it, I would highly recommend it, and just give cozy fantasy a try because I think that there are a lot out there that would be very perfect for the spooky season. So that is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. And if you've read this and you want another recommendation, I haven't read it yet, but the prequel to Legends and Lattes was Bookshops and Bone Dust, and that comes out in November, I believe November 7th, so you could still read that during the fall time. So that's Legends and Lattes. Next we have a historical fantasy romance, and that is The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk. I read this earlier this year, and it has quickly become one of my favorite books of all time. In this, we're following Beatrice, and she is a woman who is part of this family who they are not so well off, so they really need her to marry well so that she can provide for their family. So this is very reminiscent of Victorian times, and in this time period, there is magic, and men are the only ones who are allowed to use magic and are trained to be mages. Women can use magic, but not when they're during childbearing age, so they aren't really taught magic in the same way that men are, and they have to wear these collars on their neck that they wear during their childbearing years, because if they get pregnant when they don't have the collar on, the children will become uncontrollable with the magic, so it's very dangerous. So women have to wear collars, which means that the men still rule society and rule what women can do because they are not allowed to exist without this collar, and the men decide when they can take it off. Beatrice is determined to avoid this at all costs, but she also knows that her family really needs her to marry, but she just desperately wants to become a mage. So she undertakes trying to teach herself how to become a mage, which includes binding a spirit to you, and is very dangerous when you don't have the knowledge to do so. And so she is trying to learn on her own when many men actually have years and years and years of training for this. And there's also a romance in here, and there's also a friendship that I really enjoy just seeing the progression of between these two main characters. So this is perfect for fall if you're looking for something witchy and also romantic. And the way that C.L. Polk's stories are written feels very kind of moody and eerie, but not creepy. They just have this atmosphere to them that I think is perfect for the fall season. And I just love the way the story is built through here. There's so much emotion in every page, and it's a romance, but it's focused a lot on women's roles in society, and the romance is kind of secondary to the plot, even though it is considered a fantasy romance. I would say it's equal parts romance as it is fantasy. If you do like hard magic systems, this will not be that, and if you also like your historical to be very accurate to the times, this is not. This is more of a fantasy world that is reminiscent of Victorian times. So keep that in mind, but I love this book with my whole soul, and I would very much recommend it, especially for fall season. Next up, we have a dramatic historical fantasy romance, and this is also one of my favorites of this year. If you can't see a theme, I have a lot of favorites in this stack. So that is The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This I read just I think a month ago and absolutely fell in love with it. It is drama for sure, and while it's a love story, it's a very messy one. So this is following our main character Nina, and in this society there are people called the Beautiful Ones, which are the highest in society, and she is from the countryside, but her uncle is married and he is very well off. And so her family sends her to live with him to debut in society and have his wife teach her all the ways of the society. But Nina doesn't really fit in. She grew up in the country and she just has quirks about her that are not acceptable in this society. And her Aunt Valerie is very cold and just not very welcoming to Nina. But also there is people in the world who can use like telekinesis, so they can move things with their minds. And Nina is one of those people who can do that, but it's not really welcome in high society. There are people who do it, but they're more like stage performers and things, so it's very taboo to do this in company of the Beautiful Ones. So she's struggling to keep her powers under wraps, but she also meets this man Hector, who he is like the top magician in the world. He can do these telekinesis powers and he does them in shows throughout the world, and he has made a lot of money from this. And he meets Nina and she begins to fall for him, and come to find out he knows her aunt, and her aunt and him had a whirlwind romance when they were younger, but now she is married, and he decides to kind of woo Nina to get closer to Valerie. And you know this all from the very beginning of the book, so that is not spoilers, but it is about this whole messy love triangle. In the first half of the book, it feels very much like I knew where the story was going, but halfway through, I just could not take the turn. There was so much drama and angst and twistiness at this book, and I think it made me feel like the wide range of emotions, and I think it's perfect for fall again because you get that romance, but it's a bit darker of a romance. It's not quite your happy-go-lucky romance. It's one that is emotional and takes a lot of time to unfold. So yes, I highly recommend The Beautiful Ones if you haven't already. Silvia Moreno Garcia has such a way of writing this atmospheric book. I felt transported to the story by just the first sentence. It gripped me and continued to have this lush, beautiful writing without being overly confusing or flowery. You just feel that she captures the essence of this messy Victorian-like society so well. So highly recommend for fall. Next, I have a historical fantasy. I very much love historical fantasy, and I think it's a genre that could use more love because I think it's so good. But this one is a historical fantasy mystery, and that is The Conductors by Nicole Glover. So this takes place in post-Civil War America in the city of Philadelphia. This is following Hetty and Benji, and they previously worked in the Underground Railroad to free slaves, and they have magical powers that have helped aid them in this. But now that that has passed, they now live in Philadelphia and they help their community by solving murders or solving mysteries that don't make a lot of sense. The first one is following them as one of their friends is murdered and they want to find out why. The magic system in this is very interesting because the way they use magic is by drawing constellations, and if you know specific orders of constellations, you can do different things with your magic. Each group uses magic a different way. So like the white people, they use wands for magic, but they have outlawed anybody else from using wands. So the constellations are the way that they use their magic, but there are different ways in different communities to use said magic. So I find that really interesting because it's a very soft magic system, but I like seeing how different groups of people have interpreted magic. It weaves in how magic would be affecting a society like this in post-Civil War America, and I just think that it is a very interesting look into like an alternate history America. I think something Nicole Glover does really well in these books is just building well-rounded characters that you get to see every side of them, and something you don't often see is in established relationship, friendships, and romantic. and see how they can change even in that time, even when they are established. So her and her husband have a marriage of convenience, and we get to see that marriage of convenience grow into something maybe a bit more by the end of the book. And we also get to see how she has these friends that she's had since they came to Philadelphia, and how over time friendships change and morph into different things, and how people come apart and back together again. I just found it so good. And if you're someone who loves found family, this also has an excellent found family in here. I just highly recommend it. I also highly recommend the audiobook. This is also perfect for fall because it just has this darkness, eeriness feel to it that really it compels the story and moves it forward. The magic and the way a lot of things are done, they're done at night because with the constellations and just the nature of the way that they've used their magic in the past, it was a lot of magic done at night. So it has that dark feel to it. This is just such an excellent book, and I think it's so underhyped. So if you haven't read it for fall time or just any time this year, I think it's a really good one to try out, especially if you like mystery and fantasy and you want something that kind of combines the two. This is an excellent book to try out. So I would say we're getting to the more scary side. The Conductors is spooky, but I think this next one we're going to go further and further into almost horror and spooky things. So the next one I have is definitely a favorite of the year. I feel like I should just have a blanket statement for this whole thing of just favorites of the year because love all these books that I'm recommending to you. So this one is Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. This just came out in August. I could not put this book down. It was so good and so atmospheric and just perfect for fall. So this is following Nena and Nestor, and you see them when they are younger and they decide to sneak out during the night and go find this treasure that is hidden if you can find it. And they have these old stories about this treasure. So while they are looking, Nena is actually attacked by something in the night, and then you jump 9 years forward to him, and he is now going around to different ranches as a worker and saving up money so that one day he can buy his own ranch and he can run it. And he's dealing with a lot of grief of losing Nena and just trying to exist in a world that no longer has her in it. And then you see Nena's perspective, and she actually did recover that night, and she only knows that he ran away. So she feels very abandoned by him, and she just is trying to do what's best for her family. So this takes place in 1846, and this is right at the start of the Mexican-American War. They live on the border between Mexico and Texas, and Texas has already been taken by the US, and they are now being invaded by these white men. So Nestor has to go home and meet up with them so they can go meet the Mexican army so that they can fight these invaders. He and Nena end up going on a big adventure, and there are vampires, but there are also the evils and the horrors of war that is explored in this. And I would say at the heart of this, it's a romance while being surrounded by horror. And it was so well done, so well paced, and I just think such a heartbreaking and heartwarming story. It's really diving deep into how monsters can be more than just monsters in the night, and how war and invasion really take a toll on a community, but also how a community comes together. This is just such a wonderful horror story. And if you want something that's a little lighter on the horror side and you're just kind of dipping your toes into horror, I think that this is a good one to start with. I think the concepts are terrifying, and looking at how they affect a community is important and is scary, but it's not as pop out gory scary, if that makes sense. So yes, highly, highly recommend for fall. Okay, 3 books left. So the next one I have is a thriller that I kind of personally put in horror, but I think it's actually shelved under thriller, and that is The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. The reason I say it is horror to me is that a lot of these books deal with paranormal aspects, and so there's always a paranormal aspect to her books. While they don't take center stage of the mystery all the time, they do add a eerie, creepy factor that they weave into the mystery, but is not the twist of the mystery, if that makes sense. So this is also dual timeline, and so in one timeline you're in Vermont in the 1950s at a girls' boarding school that is sent for girls who are either have caused some trouble in their community and are sent there by their parents, or maybe they're illegitimate daughters. Basically misunderstood girls are sent to this boarding school for girls where they are taught how to be a proper lady. It is following a couple girls in this school and their experience at the school. And then there is a mystery of someone who goes missing and what happened to that someone. And then in the present day, which is 2014 Vermont, and we're following Fiona, and her sister was murdered at this boarding school 20 years previous. Though the boarding school had been shut down, her sister was murdered on the grounds of this boarding school. And she just never felt right about what happened. Her sister's boyfriend was accused and committed for the crime of murdering her sister, but she has never felt closure about that, and she feels that there's more to the story than what was being told. And so when she finds out that someone has bought this school and are going to be rebuilding it and redoing it, she is curious, and she's a journalist, so she tries to meet with them to learn more about what they are doing, but also find out more of what happened to her sister. And she also gets tied up with the mystery that happened back in the 50s, and you see how these two timelines come together. And it's very creepy. You're at this old boarding school that has a lot of secrets, a lot of weird things going on in the present day, but also you see kind of the horrors of the past and how these girls are treated. And Simone St. James just has a way of writing this atmosphere that feels very spooky. It's a very good like October book when you want something that feels like things are going bump in the night. You can feel the kind of panic that some of the characters feel in certain situations, and I always just love the way her thrillers wrap up and the twists and turns they take. I find that she does dual timelines so well that they always connect, and I don't feel that I want to be in one over the other. I always like both equally, and this was no exception. I loved this book, and I think it's a perfect fall read. Then we have Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. If you want to be freaked out by a book, this is one of the top ones that have just kind of freaked me out. It's a gothic horror, so it's definitely a slower moving horror, and it's not as pop out, but the last bit of it, let me tell you, freaked me out. So this is set in 1950s Mexico. We're following Noemi as she is sent by her father to go to the house that her cousin was married off to. So her cousin Catalina had lived with them since she was a very little girl when her family passed away. So to Noemi, she's basically a sister. And her father starts getting these weird notes from Catalina that make him think something's not right and that she is actually very ill. So he sends Noemi to go and see, because it's kind of a delicate situation. He doesn't want to insert his power too much because in this society, a man has say over his wife. So he's trying to tread carefully, but he thinks something is just not right. So he sends her. She goes to this house, and it's in the middle of kind of nowhere in Mexico. And it definitely has this vibe of a English white settler who came in and built this whole manor thing in the middle of nowhere, and the townspeople all do not like what's happening at this house. Something is weird about it, and when she gets there, she immediately feels something is eerie. It's very dark and suffocating and just creepy, and she doesn't know what to do because she's trying to manage these politics of the house, because she's trying to get the best care for her cousin and make sure that she's doing what is best for her cousin. So she doesn't want to offend them, but at the same time, the family is so strange. And if you want something that is just a creepy house with a creepy family and the whole time it's just put you on edge, this is a great one for the fall. I have never been so freaked out by some things in this book. It's got the perfect like haunted eerie house feel that I just love. I think gothic horror is one of those that doesn't rely a lot on things going bump in the night and popping out at you, but it's more about what you don't see and how that can be very scary, and just the slow build up to everything is great. And I just, man, I love this book. I could not put it down. Again, I would say Silvia Moreno Garcia just writes atmosphere that is so fitting for the book she is writing, and this was no exception. This had that eerie feel, that the writing, you just felt it from the first page, and I think without that it would not have been as powerful as it is. You just immediately feel that you're at this manor, that you feel even just in the setting, the tone of the book is set by the first page, and I think that's an amazing feat for a writer. So I would highly recommend picking this up if you haven't already. The last one is probably a book that just scared the living crap out of me when I read it. And so if you want to be really scared this fall season and you haven't read this one, I would highly recommend it as well. And that is When the Reckoning Comes by Latanya McQueen. This is a really short horror set at a plantation in the South. So we're following our main character Mira, and she has this white friend that she was friends with when they were younger. There was a group of 3 of them, and they all don't speak anymore. And so she's invited by her friend Celine to go attend her wedding, but Celine is being married at a plantation, and she doesn't really see why that would be problematic. And Mira decides to go because she again wants to put an effort with her friend. And their other friend Jesse, he is going to be there as well, and so she hopes to see him and reconnect with him. So all you know is that they went to this plantation when they were younger, and there was an event that happened that they all ran away and would not speak of again, and that is really what broke up their friend group. And they are not really able to confront that, but throughout the book you see them having to confront that, and you have to see everyone confront the horrors of the past and how that trauma lives out in a very horrific ghost type setting. It's a very quick book, yet packs so much into it and so much emotion and just terror in it. There are horrific scenes in here that are very difficult to read, and I think are so necessary to highlight just the true horrors of what plantations were made of. And also it has a lot of commentary on plantation weddings and how those are problematic, and just a lot happens that I don't want to give too much away, but was such a good, scary, truly horrifying read. If you want something that is really going to scare you this fall season, I would highly recommend this. It was so well written, so just emotional and terrifying. So that's my scariest book recommended to you for this fall season. So there you go. I hope that you got some good recommendations from this video. I try to change them up every year, so I have some from my past fall recommendations. I will link as well if you want to check those out, and just compile a good list of books to read in the fall. This is obviously not an exhaustive list of all the things you could read, but I just hope you find something new that you might like. And again, always please leave comments down below. Any fall recommendation do you have? Spooky or cozy? I'm always in the mood for both in the fall season, so I'd really appreciate it. And again, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.